I'm Jason Q. I'm a temporary detective chief inspector. Never quite thought I'd reach those dizzy heights, but I have. I'm a drug policy lead in Thames Valley Police, and I'm also seconded to the Home Office under the Serious Violence Strategy as a heroin and crack action area coordinator. That's a bit of a long title, I know, but that is primarily to look at the main drivers for increases in crack and heroin use across the southeast, and work to reduce drug-related deaths, and that's until April. So, in Thames Valley Police, what we've been doing is developing harm reduction initiatives to reduce the significant numbers, the tragic numbers of drug-related deaths. Last year we had 4,359. And that's far too many. Well, one drug-related death is far too many, and I'm very passionate to do everything I can possibly do to reduce that number, not just in the South East but nationally too. So, drug policy lead, one of a team in Thames Valley Police. I work with some exceptional colleagues. Dr. Wojciech Spit is one of those. He's a detective sergeant. What a star signing that is for Thames Valley Police to have an academic doctor on board, and he's absolutely brilliant. So we share ideas, and he backs it up with the evidence, which is great, and I'm learning loads from him. So, but together we developed the diversion scheme in Thames Valley Police, which aims, in principle, to divert any person of any age found in possession by police of any substance. Whereas we can utilise what's called a community resolution, and that community resolution leaves no criminal sanction footprint on someone's record if we can apply that on the street. So if someone's eligible on the street, we can seize the drug, record the crime, hence it's not decriminalisation, and we can use an app to book an appointment to the drug service where that person can then be assessed about their drug use, which isn't enforced or coerced because that community resolution is applied on the street, but they more often than not receive education about that drug use for the first time in their lives. And we're finding some really interesting evidence from the scheme, which is now a year old, particularly for young people. So the scheme itself requires no arrest, no interview and no admission of guilt. And that's significant for a few reasons, really. Mainly, as I said earlier, about not enforcing people to the drug service, because we need to reduce the stigma attached to addiction. We need to open up drug services because they are marvellous places with skilled, brilliant people all working to reduce harm, and they are completely knowledgeable about all substances, and people don't find them in their normal lives, largely due to stigma, and that could be for many reasons, and we'll probably dive into that a bit deeper as we go on. Drugs. If I was a plumber, I've used this example before, and I used cocaine, and I was found by a bouncer on a night out, I would never probably think that I've got a problem with cocaine. I would never normally know about the toxicity, dangers and risks that taking or using alcohol with cocaine causes, and there have been significant increases in drug-related deaths because of that. But also, and we've heard this from people in that situation where through cocaine use they don't consider themselves to have problematic use or an addiction because they're not using heroin, and people sometimes believe that to have an addiction or a problem with drug use they have to use a certain type of drug in order to access the drug services, and that's so not true. That is so not true. We found already adults who've been long-term users of cannabis have learned about cannabis use and different strains and the effects on mental health perhaps, or their general health, even using cannabis with tobacco and the dangers of that, have either reduced their drug use or completely stopped. Now, it's never an intended consequence, but actually that's quite positive in all the same. So some of the other benefits we've seen have been amongst children. Significant percentage, 87% of children are voluntarily attending a drug service without any enforcement or coercion. So the referrals made by the officers on the street, family, guardian, parents are informed obviously of that process. Then the youth justice team are highly skilled at engagement, and they take them through that pathway. But that system, that once that young person then goes for a diversion, that's 4 sessions, 4 one-hour sessions. And that's actually quite arduous. Normally, that young person would be eligible for a cannabis warning, for instance, which is more often than not a piece of paper on the street. There's no harm reduction, there's no education, there's no peer-to-peer support wrap around that intervention opportunity for, say, if that person's on the fringe of a gang, or they're actually not so interested in the education about the cannabis they've been found with, but they're actually more interested about the ketamine that they're planning to use at the weekend, and then the subsequent dangers, or the cocaine use. And this is something that we've read in the media recently about middle class cocaine users. It's wrong, in my opinion, to box cocaine into one segment of society. Cocaine use is extremely wide, and in fact, I look forward to the campaign that Thames Valley Police are leading on later this month on that. So I won't give too much away just now. But there's significant opportunities for people to through education, and the diversion scheme is to give everybody an opportunity for that assessment about the drug use first, and education about that substance and a range of substances, and spread that wide throughout their peer group, without stigma, without judgment, and without a criminal record, because that's really crucial. Because we want them to come back. If they develop problematic use, we want that person to come back through that pathway without any fear. I mean, touching on racial disparity, there's a presentation we gave recently at the Law Enforcement Public Health conference in Edinburgh. I have on there some evidence from the Colour in Justice report by Release Drugs and the London School of Economics and Stopwatch, and that shows that a black person is 11.8 times more likely to be convicted of a possession of cannabis offence than a white person. Now that may be, for a copper, that's a prickly subject to actually speak about. That is firmly on that presentation because racial disparity is an issue, and that is not a criminal justice problem, that's a social justice problem. And that, this is a smaller scheme, but we have to do something to try and address these issues. And diversion, if we can divert 87% of young people through a scheme that leaves no footprint on their future outcomes, their future opportunities, then that alone is a huge benefit to that person later on. Diversion schemes are having a positive impact. It's we're a year in. We're seeing, so the feedback we're receiving is that, and that's the best judge of how well it's working, is that the drug service themselves are seeing adults that they wouldn't normally see. So we're accessing different cohorts of user than the drug service would normally see. So they're not seeing, as an example, people already in problematic use. They're seeing people much earlier in their drug using careers, perhaps, and putting intervention and building social capital all around that. And what we're also seeing is wider provision of harm reduction. So, and I've glossed over harm reduction, and I feel a bit guilty about this because it's the detail about harm reduction. So it's the peer-to-peer support of naloxone provision. So whether someone, a heroin user, perhaps comes in and is informed about what naloxone is, and that's an opiate antidote, but it saves lives. The ambulance service administered it 2,100 and something times last year in just Thames Valley in Hampshire. That's a significant number of naloxone administrations. So it saves lives. It's about caring for people. That's what this is about. this is, this isn't so much about what, drugs. This is about helping people stay safe, stay alive, and better informed. And all well and good if we capture people at the beginning of that journey rather than the end. But this Thames Valley's vision is to save lives. That's what this is about.